Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. I hope our time together today helps you thrive in life and leadership. Well, today we're talking about something you may never have heard of, because I hadn't, but I've been thinking about it a lot, and I realized it has actually cost me at times in leadership. It's not decision fatigue. It's actually called indecision fatigue. Now, you've all heard about decision fatigue, right? Decision fatigue is one of the reasons why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. It's why Mark Zuckerberg does the same. And it's one of the reasons successful leaders often eat at the same restaurants or the same food every day, or they have very rigid morning routines. But the fewer decisions, here's the principle, the fewer decisions you have to make about small things, the more mental energy you have for big things. Today, I want to talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and I kind of made up the phrase, indecision fatigue. Now, the reality most leadership books won't tell you is that not making a decision is often far more exhausting than making one. Further, the cost of indecision isn't just personal, it's organizational. So we're going to go there today. And before we dive in, I want you to know, first of all, thank you so much for tuning in. Really glad that you're listening. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. We consider it an honor and a privilege that we get to spend time together like this, and I want to make sure that you get maximum value. If you're new here, please subscribe. You'll never miss an episode. We often do a lot of interviews. I do teaching episodes like this about once a month, and we'd love to have you back for the rest of the show. You can also get show notes at careynieuwhof.com/episode 697 or in the description of your podcast player. Now, a quick shout out to our podcast partners in this episode. Today's episode is brought to you by MEDISHARE. I know the struggle a lot of you have in trying to find a healthcare solution for your family. I talk to leaders all the time. It's just so expensive. And not only does it cost a lot, it doesn't provide you what you need. So if this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Healthcare can be a very difficult space to navigate. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to MEDISHARE. They are a Christian healthcare alternative designed with you in mind. MEDISHARE offers healthcare that is flexible and affordable so that you can find a program option that fits your needs, all the while saving up to 50% on costs. They're a faith-based option, so you'll be supported and prayed for, by a community of believers. So no matter what stage of life you're in, MEDISHARE wants to be there for you. Head to medishare.gloo.us, that's medishare.gloo.us to see how MEDISHARE can work for you. And today's episode is brought to you by 10 by 10. If you're wondering how you can draw more young people and their families to your church, well, listen in. Working with the Barna Group, our friends at 10 by 10 have developed a free, easy-to-use template that helps your leadership team develop fresh ideas to connect with young people that leverage your church's unique strengths. You can get this free resource as well as ongoing monthly updates about what you need to know about Gen Z by going to 10by10.org/seniorleader. That's TENX10.org/seniorleader, where you can learn more. And now to today's teaching, one I'm really excited about. So let's think about the weight of an unmade decision. So I'd love for you to do this. Think about the decision you have to make, but have been putting off for a little while, okay? Maybe it's been sitting in your inbox and you've been meaning to review it. But every time you see it, your brain does a little dance. You think, okay, I should look at that, but then I need more data and I'm not really sure I have the time, and maybe I should talk to the team first, right? Get some input. But gathering everybody's going to take some time. Look, and then what do? You do nothing. You just leave it there and you go, well, I'll deal with that tomorrow. I'll deal with that this afternoon. Now, if that sounds familiar, I got news for you. The mental loop that involves is not free. Each time you revisit an unmade decision, you're spending cognitive resources and your energy. That's energy that could be redirected toward moving your mission forward. And there's actually a little bit of science behind indecision fatigue. If you think about it, indecision requires more cognitive resources and energy than decision making. Okay? When you're in a state of indecision, your brain is essentially running multiple simulations simultaneously trying to predict various outcomes and their consequences, and then you shelve it, and then you come back to it again, and you repeat the whole exercise again and again. Sometimes this takes days. Sometimes, let's be honest, you're doing it for months or even years. Now, that constant mental juggling act doesn't just tire you out, it creates a state of chronic stress. The American Psychological Association, by the way, has found that uncertain situations trigger a more intense stress response than predictable negative outcomes. In other words, think through this for a minute, okay? There's less stress in knowing something bad is coming down the pipe than in indecision. There's more stress in not making a decision than making one that probably is the wrong decision. Now, I'm not telling you make wrong decisions, but it's crazy that indecision triggers that kind of stress. There's also not just the personal cost on you, there's an organizational cost of maybe later. And this is where it gets interesting and costly. Indecision doesn't just affect you as a leader, it creates a cascading effect throughout your organization. Indecision, for example, is a momentum killer. When decisions stall at the top, the entire organization slows down. Your team can't move forward, resources stay unallocated, and opportunities slip away. I had this as a problem in our church as we tried to break the 1,000 attendance barrier. I kept putting off decisions. Why? Because I needed more information, because I got to include my team. And well, so-and-so's on vacation now. And it was a real challenge for me. And you know what happened in my case in leadership is I think it took us another year or perhaps 2 years to cross the 1,000 barrier because I got paralyzed by indecision fatigue, among other things. Okay, so there's an organizational cost. Second thing that happens, it's a trust eroder. Your best people, especially your early adopters and innovators, they need clarity in order to thrive. And when they bring ideas to the table and they're met with constant deliberation rather than direction, they learn to stop bringing their ideas all together. They get frustrated by your indecision. It's also a resource drain. While you're deliberating, think about it, your organization is still spending time, money, and energizing doing what? Maintaining the status quo, which might not be ideal, or it's spending dollars and time keeping multiple options open or going in the wrong direction that you're going to correct if you make the decision. It's also got a cultural impact. Indecision at the leadership level often creates a culture of hesitation throughout the organization. If the boss is a little bit like, oh, I don't really know, that trickles down. Your teams can become risk averse, innovation starts to slow down, and a wait and see mentality takes root. Finally, you're going to get an early adopter exodus. Probably one of the worst side effects of indecision is losing early adopters. These are the people who drive innovation in your organization. They're the ones who see opportunities first. They've got a bias toward action. The other thing you need to know about early adopters is that they have a unique trait. They're actually comfortable with imperfect information. They understand that in today's fast-paced world, waiting for perfect clarity often means missing a great opportunity. And when these team members bring forward initiatives and they're met with constant indecision, they don't just get frustrated, they leave. They're gone. They'll seek out organizations where decisions happen, and if you won't lead them, somebody else will. So, what do you do to break the indecision cycle? I think you're motivated now, and if you're a procrastinator, if you don't like making decisions, how do you break free from decision paralysis? Well, I want to share with you 4 strategies that I found effective. First one, super simple to do. A lot of people don't do it. Set decision deadlines. For any significant decision, here's what you do. Establish a clear timeline up front. This doesn't mean like you got to make the decision right now, but you have to decide when and how the decision will be made. So the best way to do this, put a date on the calendar. Even better, have designated decision times and meetings. In other words, you meet with leadership team every week or every other week. That's a leadership decision. That's going to happen Thursday at 11 a.m. when our leadership team you just make the decision. You know, by lunch on Thursday, you're going to have a decision. Or set aside an hour every Monday morning to work through your pending decisions. And of course, if it's a big decision, and you're going to need more time than just your normal workflow, circle a date on the calendar and decide 3 weeks from now, we're going to make the call. I have 3 weeks to get all the data, 3 weeks to get all the input, and by the end of the month, by the beginning of the month, whatever it is, on this date, I am making the call. That way, you can backfill it by gathering the data you need, consulting key stakeholders, and then deciding when you're going to decide. Along the way, you're going to run into more challenges, but you need to keep going. Now, if you run into challenges, you might say, well, the date's coming up, but I still need more information. If that's the case, you need to define a good enough threshold, because you're living in a world where on most decisions, you're never going to get perfect information. And that leads us to the second thing you can do is define your good enough threshold. Perfect information is a myth. As I always say to leaders, if you're waiting for perfect conditions, you will wait forever. The same applies to decisions. So instead, you've got to define what good enough looks like for each type of decision. What are the minimal data points you need? What level of certainty do you think is actually necessary? And to do that effectively, you may want to embrace the 40-70 rule. Now, this is something I only learned about recently, but Colin Powell made it famous when he was in the US senior government. And he says you should make decisions when you have between 40 and 70% of the information you think you need. I know even saying that out loud is making some of you nervous. If it's less than 40%, it's too risky. If it's more than 70%, the opportunity may be gone. Between 40 and 70%, make the call. Now you think about it, he's a general. In battle, you don't have all the information. You got to make important decisions. So I know some of you are nervous right now and you're saying, okay, well, what if I make a mistake? Don't I need 90%? Well, think about it. There are two types of decisions: reversible decisions and irreversible decisions. And that's another framework. So you got the 40-70 rule, but now some decisions are reversible, some are irreversible. And Jeff Bezos talked about them, founder of Amazon, as type 1, irreversible, and type 2, reversible decisions. So what you want to do is you want to make reversible decisions as soon as possible and irreversible decisions as late as possible. You want to put more time on the calendar for an irreversible decision. When a decision is reversible, make them fast. Your biggest risk then is dragging your feet and not making a decision, and the cost to acquire additional information isn't worth the effort. When decisions are irreversible, then you need the data, okay? The biggest risk is making the wrong decision. The cost of getting the information you need is probably worth the time and the effort. You want to be closer to 70% at that time of the information you need. So you got to ask yourself, do I have a reversible decision or an irreversible decision? For example, changing a service time at your church, probably a type 1 decision. If it doesn't work, well, you can flip it back and try something new a few months down the road. Hey, we tried an 8 a.m. service in the spring. We're going to recalibrate in September. We're rolling out something new. What if you're hiring a teaching or executive pastor? Well, you can always fire them, but that's a little bit more like a type 2 decision because you're not hiring someone hoping to fire them 6 months down the road. It's not totally irreversible, but it is very expensive. It's expensive relationally, it's expensive financially. So on that one, don't procrastinate, take your time, treat it more like an irreversible decision. So let's go rapid fire and think about what are type 1 and type 2 decisions, just so that framework is clear in your head. Merging with another church, type 1. Take your time. To unmerge is very difficult. Where to have lunch? Type 2. I mean, I have seen email threads between people who are like 17 emails about where and when to have lunch. Just pick a time, okay? It doesn't matter. Way too many leaders spend way too much time thinking about things that are reversible, okay? Just commit. If you picked a bad restaurant, who cares? How about this one? Committing to a denomination or leaving a denomination. Well, that is a type 1 decision. I mean, you can always leave a denomination or you can join one and then leave, but it's more permanent, all right? How about shifting staff roles or responsibilities? Surprise! I'm going to say that's often a type 2. Because if it didn't work out with this person in this new role, they're a long-term player, you can always reverse it. What about trying a new sermon series or format or theme? Well, I think that's a type 2. If it doesn't work, don't do it again, okay? How about making a substantial financial investment in a new technology platform. For example, maybe you're changing your CRM where all the data for your church is stored. Again, not irreversible. That's probably type 1, okay? Really hard to undo and redo all the equipment and training you've invested. Most people will live with the tech investments they've made for years to come. Okay, so you see that? Type 2 decisions, make it even with as little as 40% of the information. Type 1 decision, want to take a little bit longer, be a lot more certain. Now, if you start implementing this, what will you have? You'll have a decision-ready culture. The ultimate goal isn't just to make better decisions yourself, it's to create an organization capable of making quicker pivots and better decisions. So this means empowering your team. You want to clearly communicate which decisions can be made at which level. You might even want to create a clearer framework. So provide decision-making tools and criteria where maybe you're like, these are type 1 decisions, these are type 2 decisions. You can do that. Another thing you can do is celebrate both successes and learning opportunities. When decisions don't work out, focus on the learning rather than the failure. Because if you jump down the throat of your team and you're like, whoa, you made a bad decision and that's terrible, they're not going to make decisions. They'll go back to a state of paralysis. The other thing you want to do is you want to make decision-making visible. All right. So you want to explain how you made the decision, why you made the decision, not just what was decided. And you want to measure the cost of indecision. To make this concrete, if you really need motivation for your next major decision, track a few things. Track the minutes or hours spent repeatedly discussing the same decision. You know where it goes from meeting 1 to meeting 2 to meeting 8 to meeting 12. It's like, have you ever done the cost of having all those people in the room to make a decision that you didn't make? So not only do you have the minutes or hours spent repeatedly, endlessly discussing the same issue, but you've got the opportunities you lost while you were deliberating, right? There were other things you could have been doing, so you have your opportunity cost, and it's going to have an impact on team morale and momentum. People will get discouraged. They'll get used to the really, really slow pace. And you don't want that. You don't want that as a leader. So what is the path forward? Well, remember, the goal isn't to make perfect decisions. It's to make timely, directionally correct decisions that keep your organization moving forward. A few guidelines to recap. Make the decision as soon as it can be made. Not as soon as possible, but as soon as you have your good enough threshold of information. Communicate clearly and quickly. Even if the decision is we need 2 more weeks to decide, make that explicit. Let people know about the date in the calendar and go. Learn from the process. After significant decisions, conduct a brief, maybe even decision review. What made it hard to decide? How could I streamline? How could we streamline similar decisions in the future? And then, this is going to be really important, build your decision-making muscle. Like any skill, decision-making improves with conscious practice. So be kind to yourself and realize you're only going to get better at this. So the next time you find yourself in decision limbo, remember the cost of indecision is often higher than the cost of an imperfect decision. Your team isn't looking for perfection. They're looking for direction. They're looking for movement. They're looking for leadership. And if you can't provide it, they will find someone else who will. The most successful leaders I know aren't necessarily the ones who make the best decisions. They're the ones who make decisions and then work through decisive action and clear communication. And if they make a mistake, they pick it up and they try again in the future. So stop letting indecision fatigue drain your energy and slow your organization. Make the call, move forward, adjust as needed. Your team will thank you. As an organization, you're going to thrive. And as I discovered early in leadership, action creates traction. So remember, in the time you spend worrying about making the wrong decision, you could have made a decision, learned from it, and adjusted course already twice. So what I want you to do as we wrap up is identify a decision that you've been putting off, the one sitting in your inbox, weighing on your mind, the one on the agenda that never gets crossed off. Make it today. Okay, your future self will thank you. And if one of the decisions you've been stewing over for a long time is joining my Art of Leadership Academy or one of my courses, well, maybe now's the time to make the call. I'd love to invite you into my private online community where you can engage and grow with other leaders who are committed to leading healthy, growing, churches. And guess what? It's not a type 1 decision. It's a type 2. It's reversible, okay? You can get your money back anytime in the first 30 days, no questions asked, so no need to put that decision off. Here's what you get. Through comprehensive courses, through live coaching calls, and a forum to ask any leadership question you have, you'll discover new strategies, build practical day-to-day skills, and get immediate feedback from other leaders who have led through exactly the same challenges and opportunities you are facing. So you got a choice. You can keep learning from your own mistakes, or you can fast track your growth and learn directly from people who have been in your shoes before, including me. When I show up in the community, which is most days every week, it isn't a team member or a bot, it's actually me. So what do you say? If you want to stop making excuses and start on a fast track to growth, visit theartofleadershipacademy.com. Again, that is theartofleadershipacademy.com to learn more and join today. I hope you enjoyed today's teaching. Quick reminder, check out MEDISHARE. You know, they offer healthcare that is flexible and affordable so that you can find a program and option that fits your need while saving up to 50% on cost. So no matter your stage of life, head to medishare.glue.us to see how MEDISHARE can work for you. And today's episode is brought to you by 10 by 10. Our friends at 10 by 10 have developed a free, easy-to-use meeting template that helps you and your leadership team develop fresh ideas to connect with young people that leverage your church's unique strengths. Get the free resource at 10by10.org/seniorleader. Well, next time on the podcast, we are going to bring you some incredible interviews. And thanks so much for listening or watching. If you found this helpful, please share it with your team or with your friends. Text them the link, share it on social. And that helps us to really produce the best episodes we're capable of. I really appreciate the time you've invested watching or listening, and I hope this episode helps you identify and break a leadership barrier you're facing.